The domain name service, or DNS, on a Windows server allows us to resolve names to IP addresses so we don't have to memorize the IP addresses of any particular device. In a domain controller, DNS is automatically added, but on a member server or a standalone server, we need to add that manually. I'm in Server Manager, and I'm going to click on Add Roles and Features, and a new menu wizard pops up. I'll click Next until I get to the option to add the DNS server. When I select that, it's also going to prompt me for any needed features to go along with it. I'll click Next, and now I'm in the Features section where I can add additional features if I need them, but in this case I do not. So I'll go ahead and click Install. It usually just takes a couple of minutes, and when it's done, we'll take a look at the DNS console, and then I will also take a look at DNS on a domain controller as well. Installation is complete. I'll click Close. Now I'm going to go to the Tools menu in Server Manager, and I'll open up DNS. And this opens up the DNS console. And now I'm going to expand the server, expand forward lookup zones, and you can see I don't have anything here yet. And that's because this is a standalone DNS server. Even though it says DC2, I haven't made it a domain controller yet. But so I can go ahead and right-click and choose to create a new zone manually. If this is on a domain controller, it automatically adds in the zone for that particular domain and forest that you've already added. So I'll click Next. Now I have a few options. The first option is the primary zone. That means it's going to be the writable zone where I can add and delete records. The second is the secondary zone, and that's where it has a copy of the primary zone on another server. And finally, we have the stub zone. The stub zone just basically redirects you to where the writable copy of the server is. You don't see very many people go with stub zones these days because there's not a lot of use for it. But there was a time when it was useful when there was slow internet connections and you needed to have a DNS server at a secondary site. The last option is to store the zone in Active Directory, and that's only available if the server is a domain controller, which this one is not. If that was an option because this was a domain controller, then I would be able to replicate to any other Active Directory server, and it also has DNS on that server as well. Now I'm going to go ahead and choose the primary zone because the first time you create a new zone, it has to be a primary. After that, you can create the secondary or the stub. So I'm going to call this one Contoso.com, and I'll click Next. I'll choose the defaults that you see here, and click Finish. And now we have our Contoso.com DNS zone. Now, a couple of records automatically get created when you create a new zone. In this case, you see the start of authority. That means that this is the writable copy of that zone called Contoso.com, so I can go and add new records if I'd like. And it also has the name server. That means that if anyone's looking for the DNS server that points to Contoso.com, it's going to look for this record, and here it is. So if I'd like to add a new record, I can do that. Just right-click, choose New Host, for instance, put in the name of the host and the IP address, and then you'll have a static record. If anyone is a part of this domain, say if it was Active Directory, then it would automatically register their IP address in the DNS zone. Now let's switch over to a domain controller running DNS to see the difference. I'm now in an Active Directory domain controller on another Windows 2022 server. I'll open up DNS. And now we're going to see what DNS looks like on a domain controller. Expand, forward lookup, and now we see a couple of zones. The zone that says the name of the domain, in my case it's called mydomain.int, means that basically this is the Active Directory DNS domain that automatically gets installed when we made this a domain controller. It also automatically added this msdcs.mydomain.int as well, and that's going to be used by Active Directory to replicate any records to other domain controllers. It doesn't include any other types of zones as far as reverse lookup, trust points, or conditional forwarders, but it does have enough information to go ahead and run Active Directory on this DNS server. You can see some of the default records included are the start of authority, meaning it's a writable zone, just like on the workgroup DNS server, as well as the name server record, and it includes the A records for this server and any other server that's joined that domain, as well as any client also. There are also other records inside each of these different folders that have to do with authenticating and confirming any type of identity. There's much more to DNS in a Windows server, especially in Active Directory, and it's a great idea to become proficient in DNS as it can make you highly employable in the IT field.